This podcast is not normally the kind of podcast I'd put on YouTube. The more in-depth stuff tends to go on Patreon, but it's such an important topic, I thought I'd put together a relatively short podcast on the topic of all of us being mental automata. Now, I have no doubt whatsoever that this is going to offend some people. So if you don't want to hear that you have no free will and that you are a mental automaton, then tune out now, because those are the messages. And of course, I'm giving Spinoza's angle on this, which is fairly, if you really understand it, it's fairly devastating stuff. Because what he's really talking about is that we don't have a self. This much cherished thing called the self. So let me start with a quote from The Improvement of the Understanding. He said, "They never conceive the soul, as we are here doing, as acting according to fixed laws, a sort of spiritual automaton." Now, some of the words need qualifying. So he's talking about the ancients. The ancients never conceived the soul, and the soul, in Spinoza's language, is the mind. So the ancients never conceived the mind, as we are here doing, as acting according to fixed laws, a sort of mental automaton. Now, there's a lot of background material that I'd need to go through to give that the context it deserves, but what Spinoza is saying is that we have no free will. We'll get onto that in a moment, but we have no free will. The idea of free will is a fairly silly idea, and neuroscience is showing that we have no free will. Ask someone to raise their left or right hand by plugging, something onto their scalp, whatever it is. You can show that the brain actually makes a decision several seconds before they lift, either the left or right hand. They're not aware of that decision. They just raise it and say, "I made the decision to raise my right hand." But in reality, the brain did it several seconds before. To believe in free will is to believe in uncaused effects, something just happening out of nothing. So if you want a beef burger, I want a beef burger. Well, as Einstein said, and this was a précis of what Schopenhauer said, you can do whatever you want, but you cannot want what you want. And that's the reality of it. What you want is determined. You don't have free will. Your will is determined. So let me get on to this proposition 48 in part 2 of the ethics. And the ethics, if you haven't got someone to guide you through it, and I fortunately have someone to guide me through it, but if you don't have someone to guide you through it, it's almost impenetrable. Anyway, this proposition right near the end of part 2 of Spinoza's ethics says, "In the mind there is no absolute or free will." He doesn't justify it. If you want justification, then you read Schopenhauer. Schopenhauer wrote a whole book on how we don't have free will. And a great book it is as well. But anyway, in the mind there is no absolute or free will. The mind is determined to this or that volition, a volition being a choice. The mind is determined to this or that choice by a cause. So, let's say you suddenly say, "I want a beef burger." Well, maybe you're hungry. And maybe your body particularly likes beef burgers, and maybe you have some pleasant associations with beef burgers for whatever reason. So the whole thing is caused. So there is no absolute or free will. The mind is determined to this or that choice or volition by a cause, which is likewise determined by another cause, and this again by another, and so ad infinitum. So we're like, little machines being influenced all the time. You can be aware of the influences, and in fact Spinoza says that most people are cause blind. They will say something like, I want a beef burger. There you go, there's my free will, I want a beef burger, but they then don't look at the causes as to why they want a beef burger. So if we can develop the habit of sort of chasing down the causal chain, we can see that actually we're just little robots running around. There is nobody in there. There's no one at home. In fact, I did a podcast on Patreon called No One at Home, which probably explains this somewhat better. Anyway, this proposition goes on. I haven't got the whole proposition here, it would take too long, but he says, in the same way it is proved that in the mind there is no absolute faculty of understanding, desiring, loving. Of course, you hear people who say, I have very strong desires. Well, there's no I there. They're just desires. Or I'm a very loving person. There's no I there. There's just loving, and for Spinoza loving is synonymous with deriving pleasure. Again, another whole story, but so any of the things that you think you are, I am a very studious person. You may be studious, but there's no I. There's just being studious. What is being studious? Well, it's just that the ideas that you have happen, and the volitions you have, the environment that has formed you, has caused that kind of behavior. There's no I there that's doing it. So in the same way it is proved that in the mind there is no absolute faculty of understanding, desiring, loving, studying, hating, whatever word you want to put in there. Hence it follows that these and similar faculties are either entirely fictitious or nothing more than metaphysical entities or universals, because as far as Spinoza is concerned, events are discrete things. So you may see an ice cream and say, I desire that ice cream, but actually there's desire for the ice cream. And you might say to yourself, I really like food. Well, they're just discrete instances of liking food. There's no I within you that likes food. So what Spinoza is saying here, very clearly, in actual fact, and in fact the proposition that goes on after this elaborates on this. What he's saying is that there is no I, there is no self that does all these things. We're just like machines, mental machines that process ideas and information. And the thing that is always in the background determining what we do is our desire to survive. Generally speaking, if something helps us survive, we'll do it, and if it hinders our survival, we'll run away from it or try and destroy it or something. Anyway, I hope that's given you a little bit of a taste for Spinoza's take on free will. We have no free will, we're just mental automata. And the arguments here go very deep, very quickly. So if you want more, have a look on the Patreon channel.